Hello, and thank you for being here. My name's Tomi Davis. Everybody calls me TD. I'm the collaborator in chief at TVC Labs, an African angel investor and author of the book Investment Worthy Startups. Over the last couple of decades or even more, I've invested in startup founders from Lagos to Nairobi, from Accra to Johannesburg, and even beyond. I've watched brilliant founders with fantastic ideas succeed, and I've seen them fail. What I've learned is something that a lot of us don't seem to talk about, and that is the fact that the difference between startups that succeed and the ones that fail, well, it's got near zero to do with the idea. So I'm going to be talking to you about building resilient startups in emerging markets. Now, I want to start with something that's even I find uncomfortable, to be honest. And that is most startups in emerging markets, especially on the African continent, fail. Not because our founders lack talent, not because the problems they're addressing are unsolvable. They fail because emerging markets, they forgive less. Let's talk about what that means. In developed markets, a startup can raise capital, iterate, fail, and try again. Why? Well, there's infrastructure, there's redundancy, there's patience. Here on the continent, don't try to. The margin for error is razor thin. Its emerging markets forgive less. And they do that in three fundamental ways that you are seeing. First are markets. Customer acquisition is much, much, much harder. Infrastructure is inconsistent. And then competition from established players, it is fierce. Because you're not just competing with startups, you're competing with businesses that have been operating for decades sometimes. They have distribution, and most importantly, they have trust. Second is capital. Our funding rounds are much, much smaller. Due diligence is stricter. Investor patience is limited. A founder in Silicon Valley can raise $10 million dollars on a pitch deck and a dream. Here, don't try it. You need proof, you need traction, you need evidence that works. And third are the systems themselves. Regulatory policies and frameworks, they shift without notice. Our payment systems, as you well know, they're fragmented. With things like Japa and others, talent pools are constrained. You can't assume the infrastructure will be there when you need it. This is not, I'm not complaining, it's not a complaint, it's our reality. And understanding this reality is the first step towards building something that lasts. And here's what I've learned. Resilience, as you can, it's not optional, it's structural. But you see, there's some core misdiagnosis. Most people think startups fail because they have bad ideas. That's wrong, plain and simple. Innovation is abundant across the continent. I meet brilliant founders literally every week. Their ideas are sharp, their ambition is real, their understanding of the question is deep. But here's the reality. Startups don't fail at ideas, they fail at milestones. Execution gaps compound faster than vision can compensate. You can have the best vision in the world, but if you can't execute, if you can't hit milestones, if you can't prove progress, then your vision is just that, a story. And here's the hard truth. Vision is cheap. Evidence, now that's expensive. I meet founders who can describe their vision with beauty. Oh, we're going to democratize access to credit. We're going to transform agriculture. We're going to build the African stripe. These are compelling visions, but they're not proof. They're not evidence. They're not even milestones. When I meet a founder who's failed, I ask just one question. What did you learn about your business? And invariably, most of them answer with what they learned about capital, how hard it is to raise, how slow investors are to move, how unfair the system is. These are the real problems, but they're not the reasons the business failed. The real reason is they built for capital, not for customers. They optimized for the story, not the substance. And when capital didn't come, or when it came too slowly or too late, there was nothing underneath, nothing to hold the company together. So, before I tell you what resilience is, let me tell you what it's not. Resilience isn't hustle. Working longer hours does not build sustainable systems. Energy without structure burns out. I've watched founders work themselves into the ground, convinced that, yes, this hustle is going to compensate for weak systems. It doesn't. At some point, you're going to hit a wall. And when you do, if there's no structure underneath, the whole thing is going to collapse. Resilience is not endurance. Surviving through tough conditions is different from actually gliding through them. Persistence alone is insufficient. You can't be persistent and still fail. You can endure and still burn out. Resilience is not about how much pain you can take, or it's about how much complexity you can manage. It's not about optimism. Positive thinking can't replace rigorous planning. Hope is not a strategy for emerging markets. I meet founders who are incredibly optimistic, incredibly positive, incredibly convinced that, yes, TD, things are going to work out. And guess what? Sometimes they do. More often than not, optimism without discipline, guess what? It leads to disaster. Resilience is designed, not improvised. It requires intentional architecture, not reactive adaptation. So there's a pattern I've seen repeated across our emerging markets. It's so consistent that once you see it, you can't unsee it. Recognize what it is the first step towards preventing it. So what is this pattern? Well, first it starts with launch phase. Enthusiasm is high, founders move quickly, initial traction feels promising, you've identified a problem, you've built a solution, you've acquired your first customers, the pitch deck looks good, the story is compelling, everything feels possible. Been there? Yeah. Then you move to phase two, growth. Complexity increases, then the cracks start to appear. Systems are overwhelmed by customer demand. You're hiring faster than you can onboard. Processes that worked for 5 people as a team, they don't work for 30 people. Customer support is breaking down, quality is slipping, but you're still moving fast. But you're starting to feel the friction. By the time you get to phase 3, which is crisis, motion is being mistaken for progress. Stories, well, they all run the systems. Your fundamentals are exposed. You're still shipping features, still closing deals, still raising capital. But underneath, the foundation is cracking. The team is burning out. Customers are increasingly churning. Unit economics are breaking down. And all of a sudden, you're in crisis mode. Now, this pattern repeats itself literally across all emerging markets. I've seen it in fintech, I've seen it in logistics, I've seen it in agri-tech, I've seen it in e-commerce. The details change, but the pattern is exactly the same. So the question is not whether you face this pattern. The question is whether you recognize it early enough and build structure before you need them. Now, when an investor looks at your startup, they're asking themselves one fundamental question. Can this team handle more complexity without breaking? They're not asking about ambition. Investors see ambitious pitches daily. Grand visions are table stakes in African tech ecosystem. Dreams about scaling across 54 countries. It doesn't differentiate your startup. What we're asking about is readiness, systems that demonstrate capacity, teams that show operational maturity, metrics that prove discipline, evidence that you can execute today. Guess what? It predicts success tomorrow. This is why the best founders I know are obsessed with fundamentals, not just story. Fundamentals, well, the teams, the systems, the processes, the metrics, the evidence. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce you to a framework that I've used with founders across Africa and I've seen work even in the hardest markets. It's a system that investors already use to evaluate startups. It's a system that separates companies that last from companies that burn out. I call it POEM, the POEM framework. And POEM stands for proposition, organization, economics, and milestones. Now, these aren't theoretical concepts. These are the four structural pillars that will enable you to build and execute your vision. Vision is the destination. POEM, well, that's the architecture that gets you there. Let me walk you through each of these pillars. Now, the PM proposition means what problem are you really solving and for who? Which market? Which customer? What's the solution? Here's the hard truth. If customers would not notice when you stop operating, then you don't have a business worth funding. Your proposition must solve a problem people actively experience. In emerging markets, this is even more critical. Customers aren't going to pay for clever or smart. They're going to pay for something reliable and dependable. They're going to pay for something that solves their problem faster and cheaper than any other alternative. Don't you? I watched a founder in Nairobi. He built a sophisticated inventory management system for small retailers. It had, everything. I'm talking of real-time tracking, predictive analytics, supplier integration. It was beautiful. Well, small retailers, they didn't want to learn new software. They just wanted to know, what do I order tomorrow? The founder eventually stripped the product down to a simple SMS-based system that told you, here's what to reorder. That's when it took off. So you see, the key principles for proposition is the fact that reliability beats cleverness in emerging markets. Consistency matters more than innovation theater. A product that works reliably will outcompete a product that's more innovative but less dependable. Consistent value delivery. That's what builds trust faster than your innovation theater. And guess what? Trust is a significantly major currency in emerging markets. When you consistently deliver value, customers trust you. When you keep surprising them with new features they didn't ask for, they get confused. And you see, customer retention signals product market fit more than viral growth. Anyone can acquire users if they spend enough money. Question is, can you keep them? That's the real test. And here's my key insight here. The best propositions are simple to explain, but hard to replicate. If you need 10 minutes to explain your value proposition, it's not clear enough. If your proposition can be replicated in a week, it's not defensible enough. Now, let's talk about organization, the O in poem. Can your team and system scale? That's where I see most founder resistance. Founders want to talk about their vision, they want to talk about their product, they don't want to talk about processes and governance. But organization is where the magic happens. And guess what? There are two types of organizations. What are they? Well, founder dependent. Every decision routes through you, the founder. The business stops when you stop. You're the one closing all the deals. You're the one closing all the customers. You're the one solving all the problems. You're the one making all the calls. The business works. Why? Because you're extraordinary. But guess what? That business doesn't scale. What happens? You burn out. Second, systems dependent. Clear processes that enable delegation. The business runs with or without you. Decisions are made at the right level. Problems are solved by the right people. You're not a bottleneck. You're a leader. Here's the key principle. Clarity, guess what? It beats charisma. If everything routes through you, the business is fragile and therefore it's uninvestable. Investors fund systems, not superheroes. We want to see that your organization can scale beyond your personal capacity. We want to see that you build something that doesn't depend only on your genius. I worked with a founder in Accra who was the classic founder, dependent entrepreneur. She was brilliant. She was closing deals, she was solving every problem, but the business couldn't scale. She was the bottleneck. I spent 6 months with her building systems. We documented processes, we hired a team, we moved decisions down, and suddenly the business started to scale. Not because the founder got smarter, but because her organization got stronger. So you see, the key principles for organization is what? Build your processes before you need them. Document your decisions. Have regular meetings with your team. Have regular meetings with your board. Know your numbers. Know what's working and what isn't. I know this is not sexy. It's not the part of entrepreneurship that people talk about, but it's the part that separates companies that last from companies that burn out. Let's talk about the E in poem, which is the economics. Do the numbers actually work? Because I see founders obsessed with growth at any cost. They're raising capital to fuel user acquisition without understanding their underlying economics. They're building businesses where it costs more to acquire a customer than that customer will ever pay that business. They're ignoring gross margin, retention, They're ignoring the fundamental question: does this business work? See, unit economics aren't sexy. They don't make for a compelling pitch deck, but they're the difference between a business and a hobby. I watched a founder in Abuja build a delivery platform. I mean, it was beautiful. The app worked, customers loved it. But well, the unit economics were broken. What do I mean? Well, it costs 500 naira to acquire a customer. The average order the customer will give you is about 2,000 naira. The platform took 25%. The delivery cost 800 naira. So on a 2,000 naira order, they made 500 naira. But it cost them 500 naira to acquire the customer in the first place. That's zero margin for operations, for tea or anything. They kept raising capital to cover the losses. Eventually, the capital ran out. So, in terms of key principles for economics, the first thing is to develop capital discipline early in the game. Get burn rate conscious right from day one when you're spending your money. Use runway calculations that account for our market realities. You can't assume capital will always be available. Build a business that works with less. Make revenue logic clear. Okay, that means pricing that customers can afford and your business can sustain. It means unit economics that improve with scale. Because if your unit economics don't improve with scale, Houston, you got a problem. And you've got to understand impact. It means social impact that enhances, not compromises your financial sustainability. I'm talking of metrics that matter to both communities and investors. You can build a business that makes money and makes a difference. But guess what? You've got to be intentional about both. And here's the key insight here: scale amplifies discipline, it doesn't create it. If your unit economics don't work at small scale, they definitely aren't going to work at large scale. If anything, they'll get worse. So now let's talk about milestones. The M in poem. The question is, can you prove progress consistently? This is where the rubber meets the road. This is where vision becomes evidence. I see founders obsessed with vanity metrics. Oh, we've got 100,000 downloads. We have 50,000 signups. But how many are paying? How much does it cost to acquire? How much are they paying? How long do they stay? What milestones have you actually hit? These are the questions that matter. These are the milestones that tell you whether you have a business or just a product. An example, I found in Lagos, built a consumer app, solid, grew to 1 million users in a year. The pitch there looked incredible. But guess what? You look at it, the unit economics were terrible. It cost more to acquire a user than they would ever pay. The founder kept raising capital to fuel growth, thinking the scale will fix the problem. Eventually, the capital ran out. So, what are the key principles of milestones? Well, first and foremost, start with proof, not promises. Don't tell an investor what you're going to do. Instead, show them what you've done. Show them customers who are paying with unit economics that work. Show them a team that can execute and the milestones you've hit with them. Then focus, not fragmentation. At each stage, there are specific milestones that matter. A pre-seed startup, well, you need to prove that the problem is real. If you're a seed, prove to me that customers are paying. Growth stage, well, can you scale? By the time you're Series A, it's about whether your unit economics work or not. Know what stage you're at. Know what milestones matter at your stage. And finally, on this one, I've got to tell you, honesty, not hype, is what works. That means real numbers only, I beg. If your metrics are not where you want them to be, fine, that's okay. Investors want to see that you're honest about where you are. Because you see, honesty builds trust. Hype, on the other hand, well, it builds skepticism. That's what happens. You see, let me be clear about what milestones are not. They're not aspirations. Future goals belong in strategy documents, not evidence portfolios. Aspirations are where you want to be. Milestones, well, they're where you've proven you can get to. They're not deck slides. Beautiful projections do not constitute proof of execution capability. I've seen incredible pitch decks backed by weak execution. The slide looks amazing. The reality is different. They're actual evidence. I'm talking about completed objectives, validated assumptions. That's what milestones are. Metrics that demonstrate progress. Each milestone earns the next level of trust from investors, partners, and customers. In our emerging markets, credibility is built incrementally through consistent delivery. So, what investors actually see when they look at you and evaluate your business? Clear things. First, clean execution. Promises made, backed by promises kept, and timeline met. That's what I'm looking for. Pivots explained with data showing discipline and accountability. I'm talking of consistent signals, monthly updates that show, yes, you're making real progress with metrics that trend in the right direction. This shows you're tracking what matters and moving forward methodically. And I'm talking about story data alignment. What I mean by that is your narrative matches your numbers. You're supporting your claims with evidence. This shows integrity and prevents the gap between what you're saying and what's actually happening. Noise, well, it gets ignored in our competitive investment landscape. Evidence compounds over time, building investor confidence and unlocking capital. So you see, many pitches they miss because what I see constantly, founders come in with compelling stories about market opportunity, passionate founders with deep local knowledge, vision that resonates with the African development goals. But then I dig into the system, and what do I find? Great narrative, no clear path to profitability. Operational processes that can't scale. Teams lacking critical competencies. Financial projections that are disconnected from reality. You really need to know that. Weak systems undermine even the strongest vision. Potential without readiness, well, it creates hesitation. Investors see gaps and they'll pass, even when they believe in your vision. So, in terms of the shift you really got to make, this is where the real work begins. And I'm asking you to make some fundamental moves. First, you need to move from survival to longevity. Stop optimizing for the next 3 months, the next 3 months. Start building for the next 3 years. Design systems that endure market cycles. Think long-term sustainability, not short-term survival. And please move from storytelling to evidence. Reduce pitch time. Increase your execution time. Let your metrics tell your story. Document your progress. I'm talking of rigorously. Your numbers should speak louder than words. And finally, please move from motion to progress. Distinguish activity from achievement. Measure your outcomes, not outputs, and focus on milestones that create enterprise value. Shipping features is not the same as building a business. Look, the real truth is resilience is boring. It's built on three unglamorous but solid foundations: process, discipline, and repetition. On process, I'm talking about the fact that documented workflows, repeatable systems, standard operating procedures. Yeah, I know they're not exciting, but that's what allows your business to run without you. For discipline, we're talking about financial rigor. We're talking about quality control. We're talking about consistent execution. Again, none of this is flashy, but it's what separates businesses that last from businesses that burn out. And for repetition, we're talking about daily habits: start a day, end a day, weekly reviews, start a week, end of week, midweek, monthly assessments. This I know isn't inspiring, but it's what builds momentum and compounds progress. That's why it works. Boring systems produce extraordinary results in emerging markets, especially where chaos is our default. While competitors are chasing the next big thing, you're building the infrastructure that outlasts them. So, here's how Poem works. It's not a one time exercise, it's something you return to consistently as your business grows, because your answer to each of these questions is going to change. Your job is to stay ahead of that change and keep asking the questions while being honest about the answers. On your proposition, do you have a clear value proposition? Can you articulate it without jargon? Does your team believe in it? Do your customers believe in it? If you can't answer these questions, you don't have a clear value proposition yet. On organization, can you actually deliver this? Do you have a team? Do you have the processes? Do you have governance in place? Do you have the capability? If you can't answer these questions honestly, you're not ready to scale. And as for the economics, well, does your unit economics work? What's your business model? How much does it cost to acquire a customer? How much are they going to pay? What's your gross margin? Again, if you can't answer these, you don't have a viable business yet. And as for milestones, what are the key milestones you've hit? What are the ones you've planned ahead? How are you tracking progress against them? Are you honest about what they're telling you? Milestones are proof, they're not promises. Since we started, I've seen Poem help founders in specific ways. First, it helps you survive due diligence. When an investor looks at your business, they're asking some the same questions. So if you've already answered them honestly, you're not surprised by the questions, you're not defensive, you're clear. Second, it helps you survive shocks. When the market changes, as it often does in our neck of the woods, when capital dries up, we're starting to see it. When a strong competitor emerges, you know what matters. You know what to protect. You know what to let go. And you know how to make decisions quickly. And how does it help you survive? Well, it helps you survive the long capital cycles. In emerging markets, as I said, capital moves slowly. Investors can take months to decide. So if you're waiting for capital to validate, your business, you're going to be waiting a long time. But guess what? If you're validating your business with customers, you don't need to wait. You keep building, you keep learning, you keep improving. And then when capital finally shows up, you're going to be much, much, much further ahead. So I want to end with a challenge. You're here at SME Fest because you believe in building something. You believe in solving problems. You believe in creating value. That's admirable and it's necessary. But belief is not enough. Belief without structure is just hope. And hope, as I said, is not a strategy for emerging markets. I'm asking you to commit to something different, not to work harder, not to believe more, but to build differently. Build for durability, not just performance. Build systems, not products. Build evidence, not just stories. Build for the long term, not just for the next funding round. I'm not saying this is easy. It is not easy. It's actually harder than the alternative. It's easier to chase growth. It's even easier to raise capital. It's easier to tell a compelling story, but it's not sustainable. And it's not what emerging markets like ours need right now. What we need are founders who understand that resilience is structural. Those who understand that vision is cheap and evidence is expensive. Those who understand that poem is not a framework just for investors, but it's a framework for building businesses that last. To be blunt, resilience attracts capital, not the other way around. When you build a business with a clear proposition, strong organization, sound economics, and proven milestones, capital will find you. Investors will find you. Customers will find you because you've built something real. So here's my challenge. Don't build for the pitch deck, build for the customer. Don't build for the investor, build for the market. Don't build for the story, build for the substance. Build a resilient startup. Build it with the poem framework so it's built to last. My name's Tomi Davis. I trust that helps. Have a great one.